The Seattle rain tapped gently against the windows of the cramped apartment that served as both home and headquarters for Brenda Chen and her husband, Jacob Mercer. The blue light of Brenda's monitor cast an ethereal glow across her face as her fingers danced across the keyboard, writing lines of code that would eventually revolutionize the cybersecurity industry. From the kitchen table that doubled as his office, Jacob spoke animatedly into his phone, his smooth voice working its charm on potential investors. "We've got something special here," he said, winking at Brenda, who responded with a tired smile. "NextCourse Solutions isn't just another tech startup. My wife is creating something that will change how companies protect themselves online." This had been their rhythm for 18 months. Brenda building the technological foundation while Jacob secured the funding and connections. It was a partnership that worked brilliantly, blending her technical genius with his business acumen and charisma. Brenda pushed her thick-rimmed glasses up the bridge of her nose and stretched her arms above her head. At 34, she already had the reputation of being something of a prodigy in programming circles. With a PhD in computer science from MIT and 5 years at Microsoft's security division, she had the credentials to match her ambition. But it was her intuitive understanding of how systems could be penetrated that set her apart. She thought like the hackers she was trying to stop. "Jacob, come look at this," she called out, excitement evident in her voice. "I think I've cracked it." Jacob ended his call and crossed the small apartment in 3 strides. He leaned over her shoulder, his cologne mixing with the scent of the coffee that had gone cold beside her keyboard. "What am I looking at, babe?" he asked, his eyes scanning the complex algorithms on the screen. "It's a predictive model," Brenda explained, pointing to various sections of code. "Most security systems are reactive. They identify threats after detection. But this can analyze patterns and predict attacks before they happen. It's like a weather forecast for cyber threats." Jacob's eyes widened as he began to grasp the implications. "You're telling me this can see attacks coming?" "Not just see them coming. It can identify vulnerabilities that haven't even been exploited yet." Her voice trembled with the excitement of breakthrough. "We could help companies patch their systems before hackers even know the weaknesses exist." Jacob straightened up, running a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. At 38, with an MBA from Stanford and the polished appearance of someone who belonged in boardrooms, he complimented Brenda's more reserved nature. Where she saw code, he saw dollar signs. "This is it, Brenda. This is what's going to put NextCore on the map." 6 months later, NextCore Solutions moved from the apartment to a sleek office space in downtown Seattle. Their client list had grown from local businesses to national corporations, and their small team had expanded to 15 employees. Brenda had refined her predictive platform to such accuracy that it had already saved 3 major clients from what would have been devastating attacks. The evening of their first anniversary as a company, Jacob popped champagne in their new conference room overlooking Elliott Bay. The sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, a backdrop that seemed to signal the bright future ahead. "To Brenda," Jacob said, raising his glass, "the technical genius behind everything we've built." The small team cheered, and Brenda blushed, never comfortable being the center of attention. Still, she couldn't help but feel proud. NextCore was valued at just over $2 million now, and industry publications were starting to take notice of their innovative approach. "And to our next big step," Jacob continued. "I'm pleased to announce that next week we'll be welcoming Melissa Rodriguez as our new Director of Business Development." Brenda's smile faltered slightly. This was the first she'd heard of this new hire. "Jacob, can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked quietly as the team returned to their conversations. In the privacy of her office, Brenda confronted her husband. "Why didn't you discuss this with me? We agreed major decisions would be made together." Jacob placed his hands on her shoulders. "It all happened so quickly. Melissa became available unexpectedly. She just left Oracle, and I had to move fast. Trust me, She's exactly what we need to scale up. MBA from Harvard, connections throughout the industry, and experience with companies 10 times our size. Brenda hesitated. I just think we should be careful about growing too quickly. The platform still needs refinement and that's exactly why I hired her, Jacob interrupted smoothly. So you can focus on what you do best, the tech, while we handle the business side. This company is going to be massive, Brenda. We need people who know how to navigate at that level. Unable to argue with his logic, Brenda nodded reluctantly. Okay, I trust you. Jacob kissed her forehead. That's my girl. We're a team, remember? Always. As they rejoined the celebration, Brenda couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. For the first time since they'd started NextCore, she felt slightly out of step with her husband and the company they'd built together. Melissa Rodriguez arrived at NextCore Solutions like a perfectly engineered storm system, beautiful, powerful, and with the potential to change the landscape entirely. At 35, she possessed the kind of polished confidence that commanded attention the moment she entered a room. Her designer clothes, impeccable makeup, and the subtle hint of an expensive perfume created an image of success that was impossible to ignore. I've been following your work for months, she told Brenda during their first meeting, her voice warm with admiration. Your predictive security model is revolutionary. Most companies are still playing catch-up when attacks happen, but you've changed the entire paradigm. Despite her initial reservations, Brenda found herself warming to Melissa. It was refreshing to have someone who seemed to genuinely understand and appreciate the technical complexities of what she had built. Thank you, Brenda replied, unconsciously pushing her glasses up her nose, a habit from her coding days that emerged whenever she felt scrutinized. The challenge now is refining the neural network to recognize even subtler patterns without generating false positives. That's exactly where I see tremendous market potential, Melissa said, leaning forward eagerly. Companies would pay a premium for that level of certainty. We should position NextCore as the absolute elite option in the market. Higher price point, but unmatched reliability. Jacob, who had been watching this exchange with satisfaction, nodded approvingly. See, this is why we needed Melissa. She gets it. Over the next 3 months, Melissa's impact on NextCore was undeniable. She reorganized the sales team, introduced sophisticated marketing strategies, and landed meetings with Fortune 500 companies that had previously seemed out of reach. The company's valuation climbed to $4 million, then 6, then 8, as investors recognized the potential of Brenda's technology combined with Melissa's business acumen. On the surface, everything was thriving, but beneath the success, subtle changes were occurring that made Brenda increasingly uneasy. It started with small things, meetings rescheduled without her knowledge, technical presentations given to clients where her work was presented as team efforts rather than her innovations. Jacob began staying late at the office with Melissa to strategize, coming home smelling of whiskey and her perfume. The Anderson contract is huge, Jacob explained one night when he returned home after midnight. Melissa and I needed to perfect the pitch. They're a traditional company. They respond better to my delivery than yours. You know how you get when you start talking technical. How do I get? Brenda asked, arms crossed as she stood in their kitchen. You know, Jacob waved his hand vaguely. In the weeds. Too detailed. Client's eyes glaze over. Melissa's helping me translate your brilliance into language that executives understand. The excuses always sounded reasonable, but they accumulated like small weights on Brenda's shoulders. She found herself increasingly isolated at the company she had co-founded. New technical hires reported to Melissa instead of her. Strategic decisions were made in meetings she wasn't invited to. One Tuesday morning, Brenda arrived early at the office to find Jacob and Melissa already there, huddled over documents in the conference room. Through the glass walls, she could see the intimacy in their posture, heads close together, Melissa's hand casually resting on Jacob's arm as they laughed about something. When they noticed her watching, they quickly straightened up and waved her in with forced smiles. "Just reviewing the quarterly projections," Jacob explained, shuffling papers. "We didn't think you'd be interested in the financial details." "I'm the co-founder," Brenda reminded him, her voice steady despite the hurt building inside her. "I should be involved in all aspects of the company." Of course," Jacob agreed quickly. "It's just that we know how valuable your time is. The engineering team needs your guidance on the new update, and we didn't want to distract you with administrative stuff." Melissa nodded sympathetically. "Jacob mentioned you've been working so hard on the core algorithm. We're just trying to take some of the burden off your shoulders." Their concern seemed genuine, but as Brenda walked to her office, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being systematically pushed to the margins of her own company. That afternoon, she noticed a new email distribution list for executive strategy that included Jacob, Melissa, and the new CFO they'd hired. But not her. That night, unable to sleep, Brenda slipped out of bed and opened her laptop. A notification blinked on her screen, a security alert from the system she had designed to monitor unusual access patterns on the company network. Someone had been accessing her files late at night from Jacob's credentials. With growing suspicion, she began digging deeper, following digital breadcrumbs through the company's systems. What she found turned her unease into ice-cold certainty. Jacob had created a separate email account that wasn't on the company server. Using her security expertise, she managed to access it and discovered hundreds of exchanges between him and Melissa, dating back almost to Melissa's first day. The emails started professionally, but quickly evolved into flirtatious exchanges, then explicit messages about their affair. But what truly devastated Brenda wasn't the infidelity. It was the calculated business conspiracy laid out in detail. "We need to continue building a case about Brenda's erratic behavior," Jacob had written 3 weeks earlier. "Document every instance where she seems overwhelmed or confused. We'll need this for the board when we push for her removal. The lawyers say we need to establish a pattern of her being unable to perform her duties," Melissa replied. "I've already started suggesting to the engineering team that her code has become unstable, and the shell companies are set up for the financial restructuring once she's out." "Perfect. Once we remove her as CTO for cause, I'll file for divorce simultaneously. The timing is crucial. She can't have time to build a defense. With the right documentation, we can minimize her stake in the company." With shaking hands, Brenda downloaded the entire email history, along with financial documents showing how Jacob and Melissa had already begun siphoning company funds through fake consultancies. The betrayal was complete, meticulous, and clearly long-planned. As dawn broke over Seattle, Brenda made 2 decisions. She would not confront them immediately, and she would not go down without a fight. They had underestimated her intelligence and her resolve. Now she would show them exactly what a woman with her skills was capable of when cornered. For 3 days, Brenda maintained a perfect facade. She smiled at Jacob over breakfast, nodded agreeably in meetings where Melissa subtly undermined her authority, and pretended not to notice when they exchanged knowing glances across the conference table. Her performance was flawless. The unsuspecting wife, the gradually marginalized co-founder accepting her diminishing role. Behind this mask, however, her mind worked with cold precision. Each night, while Jacob slept, she executed a carefully crafted plan. First, she created an encrypted repository documenting her contributions to every aspect of NextCore's technology. She retrieved archived code versions, proving she was the sole architect of the core predictive algorithms. She recorded conversations where Jacob and Melissa unknowingly admitted her critical role while discussing how to minimize it publicly. "We need to be careful about the patents," Jacob had said in one recorded meeting. "They're all based on Brenda's original work. We need to file new ones with team attribution before making any moves." "Already working on it," Melissa had replied. I've had legal reclassify her recent innovations as collaborative efforts. On paper, it's looking more like she's just one contributor among many. Brenda also discovered the full extent of their financial scheme. Jacob and Melissa had created 3 shell companies that were billing NextCore for non-existent services, diverting nearly $500,000 into accounts they jointly controlled. The money trail was cleverly disguised, but not clever enough to evade Brenda's methodical investigation. But her most significant countermeasure was what she called her insurance policy, a sophisticated modification to the platform's core security algorithms. She didn't sabotage the system. That would be too obvious and potentially harmful to clients. Instead, she created subtle vulnerabilities that would only become apparent under specific circumstances. These weaknesses were like digital time bombs, perfectly concealed within legitimate code. The beauty of good code is that it tells a story, she whispered to herself as she worked through the night, her fingers flying across the keyboard. And I'm writing the final chapters they never saw coming. Each vulnerability was meticulously documented in her private repository, along with the exact patches needed to fix them. She wasn't destroying the company she had built, she was creating leverage. On the morning of the 14th day since discovering the betrayal, Brenda received a calendar invitation. Strategic discussion, 9:00 a.m., executive conference room. The attendees included Jacob, Melissa, the company's legal counsel, and the head of HR. The timing aligned perfectly with what she had discovered in their emails. This was to be her execution day. She dressed with particular care that morning, choosing a crisp white blouse and her most professional charcoal suit. She pulled her usually loose brown hair into a tight, elegant bun and replaced her typical minimal makeup with a more polished look. When Jacob commented on her appearance over breakfast, she simply smiled. "Important day," she said. "I have a feeling things are about to change." His momentary discomfort was quickly masked with a practiced smile. "You look great. I've got that meeting first thing, but maybe we can grab lunch later." "We'll see," she replied, knowing there would be no lunch, at least not together. At precisely 9 a.m., Brenda walked into the conference room with her head held high. Jacob sat at the head of the table, with Melissa to his right. The company lawyer and HR director exchanged uncomfortable glances as she took her seat. "Brenda," Jacob began, his voice taking on the sympathetic tone she had come to recognize as his manipulation voice. "We've asked you here today because we need to discuss some difficult issues regarding your role at NextCore." She remained silent, watching him with unwavering eyes. "The technical demands of our platform have grown beyond what any single person can manage," he continued. "We've observed some concerning patterns in your work performance over the past few months: missed deadlines, erratic decision-making, resistance to collaborative approaches." Melissa slid a document across the table. "We've prepared a transition plan that we believe is fair to everyone involved. Your contributions to NextCore have been valuable, but it's time for a different leadership approach in technology." Brenda glanced at the document without touching it. The words "termination for cause" and "reduced equity compensation" jumped out from the page. "And," Jacob added, clearing his throat, "I'm afraid I need to tell you that I believe our marriage has run its course as well. I've filed the necessary papers this morning." The conference room fell silent. The HR director looked at the floor, clearly uncomfortable with the personal element being mixed with business. Brenda took a deep breath and finally spoke, her voice steady. "I understand. May I collect my personal items?" The surprise on Jacob's face was evident. He had expected tears, protests, a scene that would further document her instability. "Of course," he recovered quickly. "Susan from HR will accompany you. We've prepared your old laptop for you to take. We've wiped the company data, but thought you might want it for personal use." Brenda almost smiled at this. The laptop they considered a generous parting gift was exactly what she needed. "Thank you for your consideration." As she packed her few personal items under the watchful eye of the HR representative, Brenda counted down in her mind. The code she had written would activate exactly 10 minutes after her credentials were deactivated from the system. A trigger Jacob's security team would never think to look for. She walked out of NextCore's glass doors at 9:45 a.m., carrying the laptop and a small box of belongings. By 9:55 a.m., her access to all company systems had been revoked. At 10:05 a.m., as Brenda sat in a coffee shop 6 blocks away, the first of her embedded vulnerabilities activated, creating an almost imperceptible opening in NextCore's defenses. By noon, hackers from 3 different countries had identified and begun exploiting these weaknesses. The company that promised to predict and prevent cyber attacks was now experiencing exactly what they had sworn to protect others against. And Brenda, sipping her latte and watching the chaos unfold on her personal laptop, knew that this was just the beginning. The first signs of trouble appeared exactly as Brenda had anticipated. At 12:17 p.m., NextCore's internal alert system began flagging unusual access patterns across multiple servers. By 1:30 p.m., their largest client, Westfield Financial, reported suspicious activities in their secure communication channels that were supposedly protected by NextCore's platform. From her corner table at the Elm Street coffee house, Brenda monitored the situation through various channels. She had no direct access to NextCore's systems anymore, but she didn't need it. The technical message boards were lighting up with reports, and she had created a special alert on her phone that monitored NextCore's stock price and social media mentions. The steady downward trend told her everything she needed to know. Her phone buzzed with a text from Amy, a junior developer who had always been kind to her. "What the hell is happening? Everyone's freaking out. Jacob is screaming at the security team." Brenda didn't respond. Instead, she opened her laptop and checked the news. Technology blogs were already picking up the story. Cybersecurity innovator NextCore experiences major security breach. Another headline read, "Clients fleeing as NextCore Solutions fails to secure its own systems." By 4 p.m., the situation had escalated dramatically. 3 major clients had publicly announced they were suspending their contracts with NextCore pending a full security review. The company's stock had dropped 30% in a single afternoon. Social media was ablaze with industry analysts questioning how a company built on predictive security could fail to predict attacks on its own infrastructure. Brenda's phone rang, Jacob's name flashing on the screen. She declined the call. He tried again, immediately. Again, she declined. The third time, she turned off her phone completely. Instead of returning to the apartment she had shared with Jacob, Brenda checked into a boutique hotel downtown. She ordered room service, took a long shower, and for the first time in years, slept without setting an alarm. The next morning, she awoke to 27 missed calls, 18 voicemails, and dozens of text messages. Most were from Jacob, growing increasingly desperate. 7:15 p.m. "Brenda, we need to talk. Something's happening with the system." 8:32 p.m. "This is serious. Whatever you did, we can work it out. Call me." 10:47 p.m. "The Anderson account just pulled out. That's $2 million in annual revenue gone. Please call me." 1:03 a.m. "I know you did something to the code. Tell me how to fix it, and we can negotiate a better settlement." The most recent message, sent at 6:14 a.m., simply read, "The FBI is here." Brenda smiled faintly at this last message. She had anticipated this development. The financial irregularities she had discovered would eventually attract federal attention, especially once the company began to implode. What Jacob didn't understand was that the code vulnerabilities she had created were virtually undetectable as deliberate sabotage. To any investigator, they would appear as complex oversights, the kind that occur in any sophisticated system. She turned on the hotel room's television to find NextCore already featured on the morning business news. Continuing our top story, Cybersecurity firm Nextcore Solutions is facing what experts are calling a catastrophic confidence collapse after multiple security breaches affected their flagship predictive platform. The company's valuation has dropped from an estimated $8 million to just under $2 million in less than 24 hours. Adding to their troubles, federal investigators were seen at their Seattle headquarters this morning, responding to allegations of financial improprieties. The news cut to footage of Jacob being escorted to a black SUV, his face ashen as he shielded himself from cameras. There was no sign of Melissa. Brenda switched off the television and opened her laptop. It was time for the next phase of her plan. She had already prepared a professional website announcing her independent cybersecurity consultancy. Her resume highlighted her role as the primary architect of Nextcore's groundbreaking predictive technology, without mentioning the company's current troubles. By noon, she had sent targeted emails to contacts at 15 major companies that had expressed interest in Nextcore's technology in the past. Her message was simple. She was now available for direct consultation on implementing predictive security measures tailored to their specific needs. The responses began arriving within hours. By the end of the day, she had scheduled meetings with 7 potential clients, including 2 that had just terminated their contracts with Nextcore. 1 week later, Brenda sat in the sleek conference room of Meridian Technologies, one of the largest software companies in the Pacific Northwest. Across from her sat their Chief Information Security Officer and 3 senior executives. "Your reputation precedes you, Ms. Chen," the CISO said, leaning forward with interest. "We were impressed with Nextcore's platform, but recent events have made us reconsider that relationship." "I understand your concerns," Brenda replied professionally. "What I'm offering is direct access to the expertise that built that platform, without the corporate overhead or the complications that have emerged at Nextcore." "And your consulting fee?" asked the CFO, who had been quietly assessing her throughout the meeting. $5,000 per day, Brenda stated without hesitation, with a minimum engagement of 3 days per week for the first month. There was a moment of silence as the executives exchanged glances. "That's significantly higher than market rate," the CFO noted. Brenda smiled confidently. "Yes, it is, because what I offer isn't available anywhere else in the market." After a brief discussion, they agreed to her terms. By the end of the month, Brenda had secured consulting contracts with 5 major companies, generating more personal income than she had ever made at Nextcore. The industry began to whisper about her, the technical genius who had left Nextcore just before its collapse, the woman who now commanded premium rates for her expertise. Meanwhile, Nextcore's situation continued to deteriorate. Federal investigators uncovered the shell companies and fraudulent billing schemes. 3 more major clients terminated their contracts. Jacob appeared on business news channels trying to project confidence, but the strain showed clearly on his face. Melissa Rodriguez was notably absent from all public appearances. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, exactly 3 months after her dismissal, Brenda received an unexpected visitor at her new office, a minimalist space in a converted warehouse with views of Puget Sound. Her assistant announced that Jacob Mercer was in the reception area, requesting to see her. Brenda took a deep breath, straightened her designer blazer, a recent indulgence, and nodded. "Send him in." The man who walked through her door barely resembled the confident, polished executive who had orchestrated her removal. Jacob's face was gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. His once perfect hair was disheveled, and his expensive suit looked as though he had slept in it. "Hello, Jacob," Brenda said calmly, remaining seated behind her desk. "What can I do for you?" Jacob stood in the doorway of Brenda's office, his posture a stark contrast to his usual confident stance. His shoulders hunched slightly, and his eyes darted around the space, taking in the clean, modern design, the awards already displayed on a simple shelf, the view of Elliott Bay that rivaled their old Nextcore office. "You've done well for yourself," he said finally, his voice hoarse. I have, Brenda agreed, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Please, sit down. Jacob lowered himself into the chair, running a hand through his unkempt hair. I assume you've been following the news. Some of it, Brenda replied neutrally. In truth, she had monitored every development at Nexcore with methodical attention, watching as the company spiraled further into chaos with each passing week. The company is dying, Brenda, Jacob said bluntly. We've lost 70% of our clients. Our stock is worthless. The FBI has frozen most of our accounts pending their investigation. He leaned forward, desperation evident in his eyes. And Melissa is gone. Gone? Brenda raised an eyebrow, though this information didn't surprise her. Her sources had informed her that Melissa had resigned abruptly 2 weeks earlier. Left for Texas last week, took what money she could and disappeared. Jacob's laugh was hollow. Turns out she was playing me the whole time, too. She had a boyfriend in Dallas, some oil executive. I was just her ticket to a big payout. Brenda felt no satisfaction at this revelation. The damage Melissa had helped inflict was done, whether she'd been loyal to Jacob or not. I'm sorry to hear about Nexcore's troubles, she said carefully, but I'm not sure why you're here. Jacob's eyes met hers directly for the first time. I need you to come back. The statement hung in the air between them. Brenda had anticipated many scenarios for this inevitable confrontation, but the rawness of his plea caught her slightly off guard. Come back, she repeated flatly. The board knows we can't survive without you. The platform is falling apart. No one understands the core algorithms like you do. Clients are saying they'll return if you're back in charge of the technical side. Words tumbled out of Jacob as though a dam had broken. I'm authorized to offer you 48% ownership, real ownership, not the diluted shares we had before. Complete technical authority, veto power over all major decisions. Brenda leaned back in her chair, studying the man she had once loved, the man who had plotted her professional execution and personal humiliation. In his desperation, she saw the full measure of her own power, power she had always possessed, but that he had never truly recognized. And what would your role be in this arrangement, she asked. I'd remain CEO, but with limited authority. The board insisted on that much. They believe I still have the relationships to rebuild our client base. He swallowed hard. But I'd answer to you on anything technical, and any strategic decision would require your approval. Brenda stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline as rain pattered against the glass. Her consulting business was thriving. In just 3 months, she had established herself as one of the most sought-after experts in cybersecurity. She didn't need Nexcore anymore, but Nexcore had been her creation. The platform, with all its potential to transform cybersecurity, was her legacy, and despite everything, she still believed in what it could become. I'll consider it, she said finally, turning back to face him. But I'll need full access to the current state of the platform, all financial records, and a complete list of remaining clients. My lawyers will review any proposed agreement. Hope flickered across Jacob's exhausted face. Of course, whatever you need. And Jacob, Brenda's voice took on a steel edge. If I do come back, you need to understand something very clearly. I won't be your wife. I won't be your partner. I'll be your boss in all but title. Every decision goes through me. Every line of code belongs to me. Every client relationship answers to me first. He nodded, a man with no other options. I understand. I'll have my team contact you tomorrow to begin the due diligence process. She moved toward the door, signaling the end of the meeting. Don't expect an answer before next week. After Jacob left, Brenda called in her assistant. Cancel my appointments for the rest of the day, please, and get me Aaron Klein at Palmer Legal. For the next 5 days, Brenda's legal and financial team conducted a thorough investigation of Nexcore's current state. The picture that emerged was grim, but not unsalvageable. The core technology remained sound, despite the vulnerabilities that had been exploited. The client exodus had stabilized, with a few loyal customers standing by. The FBI investigation had focused primarily on the shell companies, which had been clearly tied to Jacob and Melissa, leaving the main business operations legally uncompromised. On the sixth day, Brenda sat in the offices of Palmer Legal with her attorney and NextCore's board representatives. The negotiation lasted 14 hours, with Brenda refusing to yield on her core demands. By midnight, exhausted but satisfied, she signed the agreement that would return her to NextCore, not as Chief Technology Officer, but as Chief Executive Officer and Chairperson of the board. Jacob would remain as president, reporting directly to her with clearly defined limitations on his authority. As the documents were being finalized, the lead board member, a venture capitalist who had been one of NextCore's earliest investors, leaned across the table toward Brenda. "I have to ask," he said quietly. "Those security breaches, the timing was remarkable." Brenda met his gaze steadily. "Technology is complicated. Vulnerabilities exist in every system. Sometimes they only become apparent under specific circumstances." The venture capitalist held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Well, we're fortunate to have the person who understands those circumstances back at the helm." The following Monday, Brenda walked through the doors of NextCore's offices for the first time in 3 months. The atmosphere was immediately different, employees watching her with a mixture of awe and trepidation as she made her way to what had previously been Jacob's corner office. He was waiting for her there, standing awkwardly by the desk that would now be hers. "I've cleared everything out," he said, gesturing to the empty drawers. "The team is assembled in the main conference room whenever you're ready." Brenda set down her bag and took in the view, the same Seattle skyline she had helped build this company to overlook. "Thank you, Jacob. I'll be there in 5 minutes." Alone in the office, she allowed herself a moment to absorb the journey that had brought her here. 3 months ago, she had walked out of this building betrayed and seemingly defeated. Now she returned as its unquestioned leader. She opened her laptop and with a few keystrokes began the process of implementing the fixes for the vulnerabilities she had created. The code had always been waiting for her return, like a loyal friend who had kept her secrets. In the conference room, 40 nervous employees waited as Brenda took her place at the head of the table. Jacob sat to her right, a symbolic position that communicated their new power dynamic to everyone present. "Good morning," Brenda began, her voice clear and confident. "I know the past few months have been difficult for all of you. Today marks a new beginning for NextCore Solutions. By the end of this week, our platform will be more secure than it has ever been. By the end of this month, we will begin reaching out to former clients. And by the end of this quarter, NextCore will not only survive, it will thrive." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of developers who had once reported to her, sales staff who had been told to marginalize her, executives who had witnessed her dismissal in silence. "Some of you know me. Some of you only know what you've been told about me. Over the coming weeks, you'll all have the opportunity to decide for yourselves who I am and what kind of leader I'll be. What I can promise you is this. If you bring your best to NextCore, if you contribute to the vision we're rebuilding, you will be valued. Not for office politics, not for loyalty to any individual, but for the quality of your work and your commitment to excellence." Her gaze finally settled on Jacob, who looked down at the table. "Now," she continued, turning back to the room, "let's get to work." 6 months later, Brenda stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Seattle Technology Summit, the annual gathering of the region's tech elite. Behind her, a massive screen displayed NextCore's redesigned logo and the words, "Predictive Security, the Next Generation." 2 years ago, NextCore Solutions began with a simple but revolutionary idea. She addressed the packed room of industry leaders and technology journalists. What if we could predict cybersecurity threats before they materialized? Today, I'm proud to announce that we've taken that vision to an entirely new level. The audience watched with rapt attention as Brenda unveiled the next evolution of her platform, a system that not only predicted potential attacks, but also automatically generated and implemented custom security solutions in real time. The demonstration showed how the system responded to a simulated attack, analyzing the threat pattern, creating a specific defense, and deploying it, all within seconds. This represents a fundamental shift in how we approach cybersecurity, Brenda continued. No longer reactive, no longer even just predictive, but adaptive and self-healing. As applause filled the room, Brenda caught sight of Jacob standing at the back, clipboard in hand, checking off media attendees. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away. In the new NextCore hierarchy, he had been relegated to administrative roles, still employed due to contractual obligations, but stripped of any meaningful authority. After the presentation, as tech journalists crowded around Brenda for follow-up questions, a reporter from Tech Insider raised his hand. Ms. Chen, NextCore's valuation has risen from $2 million to $12 million in just 6 months under your leadership. What do you attribute this remarkable turnaround to? Brenda smiled, considering the question carefully. Technical excellence has always been at the core of NextCore's potential. What changed was ensuring that this excellence remained our North Star, rather than being compromised by short-term business considerations. When you build something truly revolutionary, the market recognizes its value. And what about the security breaches that nearly destroyed the company last year? Asked another journalist. How did you manage to not only fix those vulnerabilities, but emerge stronger? Sometimes, Brenda replied, her voice measured. You need to fully understand a system's weaknesses before you can build its ultimate strengths. Every vulnerability taught us something valuable. We didn't just patch the holes, we rebuilt the foundation. As the event concluded, Brenda made her way through the crowd of admirers and potential clients, accepting business cards and scheduling follow-up meetings. The industry that had once whispered about her as the woman betrayed by her husband and business partner now spoke of her with reverence. The technical visionary who had orchestrated the most impressive comeback in Seattle's recent tech history. Back at NextCore's offices, now occupying the entire floor of their building rather than just a corner suite, Brenda walked through the expanded engineering department. 30 developers, triple the number from a year ago, worked diligently on various aspects of the platform. Most were new hires, attracted by NextCore's rising star and the opportunity to work under Brenda's technical leadership. In her spacious office, with its panoramic views of the city, Brenda found a small package on her desk. Inside was a handwritten note from Jacob and a small brass key. Brenda, the last of my personal items have been removed from the storage closet. This key is no longer needed. I've accepted a position with Telaris in Portland, starting next month. The board has agreed to buy out my remaining shares. I wanted you to know first. Jacob. Brenda held the key in her palm, feeling its weight. The metal was warm, as though Jacob had clutched it tightly before leaving it for her. This small piece of brass represented the final severance of their professional relationship, and with it, the last remnant of their personal one. She placed the key in her desk drawer and turned her attention to her computer. The latest performance metrics showed NextCore's platform operating at 99.8% accuracy in threat prediction, a figure that had seemed impossible just a year ago. Client acquisition had exceeded quarterly projections by 40%. The company was not only stable, but growing at a rate that had attracted attention from major investment firms. A knock at her door interrupted her review. Marcus Zhang, the brilliant young developer she had hired as her new chief technology officer, entered with a tablet in hand. We've just received word from Westfield Financial, he said, referring to the major client that had been among the first to abandon NextCore during its crisis. They've signed the 3-year contract. Full implementation, premium tier. Brenda nodded with satisfaction. That's the last of the big 5 to return. It's more than that, Marcus added, his expression brightening. Their CISO specifically mentioned that their decision was based on your leadership. They're paying the premium expressly because you're at the helm. After Marcus left, Brenda walked to the window, watching the Seattle sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, reminiscent of that celebration evening years ago when Jacob had first announced Melissa's hiring. So much had changed since then. Her phone buzzed with a text from Amy, the junior developer who had reached out during the collapse and who had since become one of Brenda's most trusted team members. Conference room prepped for tomorrow's strategy session. Also, the team wants to take you out for drinks after 6-month anniversary of the Renaissance. Brenda smiled at the term the team had adopted, the Renaissance. It captured perfectly what had happened at NextCore, not just a recovery, but a rebirth. A transformation into something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more successful than what had existed before. She typed a quick reply. Looking forward to both. Tell everyone first round's on me. And D. As evening settled over the city, Brenda remained in her office, reviewing the code for their next major update. There was something deeply satisfying about immersing herself in the elegant mathematics of the algorithms she had created, the same code that Jacob and Melissa had never truly understood or appreciated. They had seen her technical brilliance as a resource to be exploited rather than the company's true foundation. They had failed to recognize that in a technology company, the technology itself and those who create it are the ultimate source of power. A year ago, Brenda had sat in a cramped apartment, writing the first lines of code that would eventually become NextCore's revolutionary platform. She had trusted her husband to handle the business while she focused on building something remarkable. That trust had been betrayed in the most painful way possible, both personally and professionally. But in that betrayal, she had discovered her own power, not just as a technical genius, but as a leader capable of strategic thinking, decisive action, and inspiring loyalty. The painful lessons of the past year had transformed her as much as they had transformed NextCore. The office had emptied as evening progressed, leaving Brenda alone with her thoughts and her code. She closed her laptop and gathered her things, ready to head home to her new apartment overlooking Lake Union, a place that was entirely her own, with no memories of Jacob or their shared past. As she walked through the darkened office toward the elevator, she passed the small conference room where, 6 months earlier, she had addressed the nervous employees of a failing company and promised them a new beginning. The same room where, years before that, she and Jacob had celebrated their first anniversary as a company, toasting to a future they planned to build together. The woman who stepped into the elevator was not the same person who had walked out of NextCore with a box of belongings and a generous parting gift of an old laptop. That woman had been betrayed but not broken. She had transformed her pain into purpose, her technical expertise into undeniable authority, and her setback into the most spectacular comeback in Seattle's tech community. As the elevator doors closed, Brenda Chen, now recognized throughout the industry as the technical visionary behind NextCore's revolutionary platform and remarkable resurrection, allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. The company was hers, the technology was hers, the future was hers, and no one would ever underestimate her again. If you enjoyed this tale of betrayal and triumph, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more content like this to life.